released from lockdown. Only the fully vaccinated are eligible to take advantage of the eased restrictions. So from today, people can have 10 people visit the home, while 30 people can gather outdoors. Cafes, pubs and restaurants can welcome back customers with density limits, and there's a booking cap of 20. Hairdressers and beauty services can host up to 5 clients, and non-essential shops are reopening too. It's masks off outdoors. They're still required indoors for the next few weeks. Gyms and sporting facilities are back. Up to 20 people can attend classes. Indoor pools are also open. Community sport is still banned though. 100 people can attend weddings and funerals. The 5-kilometre travel limit has also ended, but Greater Sydney residents cannot travel to the regions just yet, and those in regional areas are prohibited from going into Sydney. The New South Wales Premier Dominic Perrottet says he believes the health system is ready to handle the expected rise in COVID cases as a result of the eased restrictions.
There are going to be challenges as we move through this period. I think we're the first state in the nation that's going down a path where those coming out to visit pubs and restaurants and cafes need to be double vaccinated. We want to make sure we don't go backwards. There are obviously rules still in place as we stage the opening up. People need to be patient as well, because there will be challenges as we go through this period. But there are a number of restrictions still in place. Vaccination has been key to us being able to open up. There's obviously a lot of excitement, but it certainly has to be tempered by making sure we continue to look out for each other. That's been our success in the past. Everybody making enormous efforts to get vaccinated. We hit 90% first dose on Saturday. That's been incredibly pleasing, and if we can keep that momentum going through this period, we'll be able to open up as quickly as possible. But so far, I think if you look at the case numbers and the hospitalisation numbers, we're below where we expected to be, so that's positive. But look, they will increase. We've invested significant amounts in our health system, and I'm very confident that we'll get through this period of time, but it's not going to be without its challenges. Even with vaccination, there will be hospitalisations, as we know. It's really important that we continue to follow the rules that are in place. They're not there for the sake of it, they're there to keep people safe as we open up.
New South Wales Premier Dominic Perrottet there. Now, we're just about to have a chat to Casey Briggs, but just checking the Victorian Government Department of Health website or the Twitter account, are those numbers still not through for Victoria? We usually get them by now, but yeah, we'll bring those to you just as soon as they do come through. ABC analyst Casey Briggs joins us now. So, Casey, yeah, big day in New South Wales today, and the numbers have come through already for New South Wales. So is that a change that's going to be regular now?
Yeah, for the first time in a long time, we've got the New South Wales numbers before the Victorian ones, but this is what we're expecting going forward. The New South Wales government last week announced that the numbers, instead of being released at 11 o'clock in the morning, they'll come out at about 9 in the morning each day. Now, what we've got today is a bit of a format change and not quite all of the detail that we would have expected to see at 11 o'clock. So I presume there will be further updates through the day. Maybe at 11 we'll get a full media release with a full breakdown. But what we can tell you is that today we have 496 new locally acquired cases, so a second day with numbers in the 400s, albeit the very high 400s. That pulls our 7-day average in New South Wales down to 570, and we have another 8 deaths as well, taking us to 438 through this outbreak since the middle of June. And so those numbers are remaining. They've come off the peak a little bit that they were at a week ago, maybe starting to sort of begin the slow downward descent, but still a significant number of people dying. What we don't have is any detail about who those 8 people were, their ages, their genders, the circumstances of their deaths. Hopefully that will come later on in the day. I also can't tell you anything about the geographic spread of those 496 cases, and normally we do get a bit of an idea of that in the 11 o'clock update, so hopefully, again, we'll get that later in the day. So what New South Wales has done basically is moved to a bit like what Victoria has been doing for quite some time, which is tweet out out the numbers at 9 in the morning, just the headline numbers, and then later in the day, I presume they will publish much more detail on those. And the other thing that we do have now that we don't get from Victoria first thing in the morning is the number of people in hospital. 769 people being treated inside New South Wales hospitals at the moment with COVID-19, 153 on intensive care. They haven't told us how many people are on ventilators. I'm not sure if that will come later as well, but yesterday it was about 75 or 76 people.
Yeah, and you mentioned Victoria has been in the habit of releasing those numbers at 9, but still not through just at this stage. So, Casey, on a big day for New South Wales where there is a degree of opening up, just paint the picture for us in terms of what the situation is now compared to what the modellers were basing their predictions on, and there seems to be a fair bit of optimism about the ability of New South Wales, from the position it's in now, to stay on top of things over the coming weeks.
Yeah, so at least for a little while, I think there will be an exit wave, if you like. We will see cases increase at some point. When exactly, we just don't really know. But as you say, the modelling that New South Wales Health commissioned from the Burnett Institute to sort of plan for how much hospital capacity will you need, just how bad will this get? Well, the numbers have come in significantly lower than that. I forget the precise numbers, but we were talking about cases in the LGAs of concern in the thousands, in the 2,000s a day or so, as sort of a point estimate for where we might end up. We've come in well under that. We were expecting, the modelling suggested that the number of people in hospital would really have yet to have peaked, especially in intensive care, and we are well and truly past the peak that we're seeing with this this mountain of cases. The question now will be, as we continue on, for at least a couple of weeks, for at least a few weeks, you would expect these hospitalisation numbers to continue to drop, because that is a lagging indicator on what we've seen from the case numbers already. So we'll expect to see that improvement continue. The question is then, when we start to see cases increase, and I'm not saying that will happen this week, we'll watch for when that does start to happen. When we see those case numbers increase, how much of an impact will that have on the hospitalisation number? Will New South Wales have successfully severed that link between, or reduced the link between cases and hospitalisation, because an increasingly overwhelming majority of the people most likely to get affected, seriously ill from this virus, are vaccinated. There are still people who aren't fully vaccinated who would be vulnerable to this disease. We want to see those numbers get high, and there are pockets of the state, there are communities, there are Indigenous communities where the vaccination numbers are lower than you would like to see. For example, we've been seeing a spike in cases in the Hunter New England region, and Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people are overrepresented in those communities. So as we start to see people living more like they used to live before this pandemic than we have for the last 100 and some days, we'll be watching, I think, pretty closely some of those communities to see what the effects are there, and if some more interventions need to be put into place if there are outbreaks and serious concerns about certain areas, certain communities, certain demographics of people.
And Casey, those Victorian numbers have just come through, and it's unfortunate there are any cases, but hearteningly the numbers are lower than they have been on previous days. So 1,612 new cases and 8 more deaths in Victoria. And so just because we've had those figures come through now, if we could just go straight to Victoria. Where does that put things now there? And I've heard you commenting over the weekend that based on what had happened in New South Wales with the flattening of the curve that we'd seen there over the last month or so, you were talking pretty optimistically about a similar flattening happening around now or pretty soon for Victoria too?
So yeah, we're sort of desperately hoping to see a turnaround in the numbers in Victoria. Our expectation would be that it would be happening kind of now or by now. absent of any factors that, are sort of seeing people mix in different ways or seeing this virus spread through pockets of people who are, breaking rules or unvaccinated or what have you. So 16-12, these numbers will not be in this chart because they've just come through while we're speaking, but 16-12 is obviously significantly lower than what we saw yesterday. I've said it before, I'll say it again, one day does not a trend make, so we want to see a sustained decrease, but that is a positive sign at least that we're not seeing another escalation. We were worried about maybe getting into the 2000s today. 8 more deaths is a significant number, as you say. In terms of the vaccination rate, let's actually just show you what that looks like in Victoria. So statewide, we're looking at 58.6% of the 16 plus population are double dosed. Now, when New South Wales hit its peak on September 11th, I think it was, the double dose rate in New South Wales was about 47%.
Right, okay.
So we're looking at more than 10 percentage points higher at the moment. One of the problems in Victoria has been the distribution of vaccines has been that the hotspot areas have been below average for the city, and so that has, I think, kind of delayed things a little bit. They are now catching up to those areas. The other problem we've got, though, is in Victoria we had some super spreading events last week, a week and a half ago now. 2 weeks ago really, because they happened over the long weekend, and I suspect there's been some transmission seeded even before the long weekend in Victoria that's seen more spot fires picking up across parts of Melbourne that hadn't seen a lot of cases, particularly the southeast, the east, but really everywhere. We've seen some really significant spikes, but the fact that the average and all areas of Melbourne are kind of starting to get to that 46 percentage point mark. We'll get an update on the LGAs and the regions today, but they're getting close toward, I'd expect them to be getting close toward the 46% mark today, and hopefully that will mean that we will see some real impact on those case numbers. Hopefully that 16-12 we've seen today that's just come through is the beginning of something, but you'd be a brave person to call a peak on just one day. We'll see a few more days of these numbers before we kind of have any certainty about that. But let's all cross our fingers and our toes and everything that we can possibly cross, that hopefully this is beginning, that we will see that peak soon.
And Casey, just before we leave you, because we don't have access to you every day of the week, and so it's a good opportunity to do this, just back to New South Wales for a moment, because we went to Victoria because the numbers just come through. You mentioned the Burnett Institute modelling, that the position that New South Wales is in now is better than it had based its kind of modelling on. Can you talk to, in any detail, what the Burnett modelling predicted case numbers would get to at these at a higher rate than we're at now? What, like, for example, was it expecting that New South Wales was going to get back up to 2,000 cases a day or more than that?
Do you mean once these restrictions eased? I don't know whether the Burnett Institute modelled that explicitly for New South Wales Health, but I don't think they published it if they did. The Burnett Institute did a package of modelling, and New South Wales Health published some of that modelling.
Right.
I don't believe that they did that. I think all that was published was the baseline scenario of what happens under the current level of restrictions that applied before today. So I don't think we've seen any estimates there. Now, in Victoria, they did do that model of what might happen once actually model the roadmap, and that has been released, and it did lead to some pretty big spikes in that model. I think we're sort of in, it's a difficult thing to model a scenario that we've not seen before in Australia.
Yeah, this New South Wales just will be a huge test case, won't it?
It will be a huge test case, and we have expectations about how things will go based on what we've seen around the world, and based on what we know about the effectiveness of vaccines, and based on what we know about how quickly people are still getting vaccinated. In 5 weeks' time, we should see more than 90% of the New South Wales 16 plus population double dosed. So we have all those expectations and that data from the international experience, but we've not seen an example in Australia that's, so you've got no source material to model against. So there's a lot of assumptions in that modelling that did predict some big spikes, and I think we will see a lot of cases going forward. It predicted a lot of, the Burnett model for Victoria predicted there would be a lot of deaths, like in the thousands, as you start to open up, and really the next few weeks will start to give us some clues about what sort of trajectory the states are on. But everyone is watching New South Wales very closely right now.
Yep.
Everyone will be watching these numbers for the next few weeks extremely closely, and I think the Victorian government probably most of all.
OK, we'll leave it there. Casey Briggs. Prime Minister Scott Morrison has spoken in Canberra after spending 2 weeks in quarantine, addressing the reopening of Sydney today and the vaccine rollout.
Today is a day so many have been looking forward to. A day when the things we take for granted we'll celebrate. Being with family and friends, getting a haircut, grabbing a meal together, going to the pub and having a beer with your mates. These are things that across New South Wales and particularly in Sydney, people will be able to do again today. And I know all around the country that will be true, particularly in Victoria and here in the ACT. I want to thank Australians for the incredible job that they've done getting vaccinated. Over the weekend, more than 400,000 vaccines were administered across the country. That is the biggest weekend we've had throughout the entire vaccination program. And that tells me one thing, that Australians have been totally up for this the whole way through. They're getting the job done. And whether you're in a state like New South Wales that is opening up today, a state like Victoria that soon will be, or over in the West or up in Queensland, where the impact of COVID has not been the same, but still we need those vaccines to ensure that when COVID inevitably comes, that in those states you'll be able to continue on as you have. So let's keep going, Australia, with the vaccination program. To all those particularly in Sydney and across New South Wales today who are opening up today, enjoy the moment, enjoy it with your family, enjoy it with your friends. I'm looking forward to seeing my family as well, having come out of this quarantine. On the other big issues, though, we need to keep going ahead, whether it's protecting Australia's national security or ensuring our economic recovery, because as we open up, the economy will bounce back strongly. And those jobs will come back and people will be back in work, and we will see that month after month after month as we get more and more people back at work, back in jobs, back in the economy. But we also must deal with the big challenges. Addressing climate change is a challenge that we must do together. As Prime Minister, it's my job to bring people together on dealing with this big change. The world is moving into a new energy economy. We all know that. It's now a question of how, not if. And how is how we can ensure that those communities right across rural and regional Australia can look at this change and understand that there are big opportunities and there's a way through. My government is committed to ensuring that rural and regional Australia transitions to this new energy economy in the future stronger, with their jobs and their communities intact, and they can look forward with confidence and they can plan for the future with confidence. We've got to come together on this issue. My government will come together on this issue. The country will come together on this issue, and we'll tackle this challenge just like we've tackled the challenges already before us.
The families of 3 Australian soldiers murdered by a rogue Afghan soldier almost a decade ago have been told the killer has walked free from prison. In 2012, Afghan soldier Hekmatullah murdered 3 of his Australian colleagues. Last year, the confessed killer was transported to a Qatari prison. He was released shortly after Kabul fell to the Taliban. Victoria's anti-corruption watchdog will today commence public hearings into allegations of branch stacking in the ALP. IBAC and the Victorian Ombudsman launched Operation Watts to investigate alleged serious misconduct and corruption involving state public officers after reports of branch stacking were aired last year. The public hearings will investigate whether MPs are directing their staff to undertake party political work while they're being paid to perform ministerial or electorate duties. The hearings will also examine allegations that public money intended to fund community associations has been misused for improper purposes. Until a few months ago, Dennis Handlin was one of the most powerful men in the Australian music industry. In June, the longtime Sony Music CEO was sacked. On tonight's Four Corners program on ABC TV, former employees break their silence to expose a toxic workplace culture where appalling behaviour was normalised and covered up.
One of Australian music's most powerful men has been unceremoniously ousted today.
I was stunned, actually. I thought he had operated with such impunity for so long. I just couldn't believe that it had actually happened.
His sacking came as a bombshell. but the global music juggernaut had known of his behaviour for decades and failed to stop him.
I think the thing that has upset most of us was that New York said, oh, we've just found out about this problem. This has just come to light. And we know that there's such a load of hogwash. That myth has to be challenged.
For them to just say, oh, we found out about it a month ago or 2 months ago, it's just implausible. And it's embarrassing and it's insulting to everyone that's worked there and copped this abuse for all those years. The neglect of corporate governance on this issue from New York is staggering. Staggering.
And you can see that full episode of Four Corners tonight on ABC TV at 8:30 and any time later on iView. Tony Armstrong joins us now with a look at the day's sport. Back from a week off. Sounded a bit dusty this morning first up, I reckon, Tony, but I think that's cleared up now. Nothing to say about that, Tony?
Good to see you, mate. Yeah, yeah. I missed you too, Joe. Something like that. I thought we were great. The team we put on another great show. A lot of stuff that we got through, and I think we were firing on all systems.
I think it's terrific to have you back. So Australia's women's cricketers have cleaned up this series against India. It was a kind of bumpy start, wasn't it?
Yeah. So I guess the series in itself was a multi-format series. They played the 50 over one days, the T20s, and also some Test cricket in there as well. And yeah, we didn't get it all our own way, but we absolutely clinched it last night with a 14-run victory. That was the third of the T20s. The match was played up on the Gold Coast. We set them a target of 150 to win, and we managed to restrict them to 6 for 135, which ensured that series win, Joe. And Beth Mooney, she was in great nick. She scored 61 runs from her 43 deliveries, and Nicola Carey took 2 for 42 with the ball. And now I guess that's wrapped up for now. The focus of a lot of our cricketers will switch to the local competition, the WBBL, which starts on Thursday before the Ashes, which begins in January, where we host England. But the way that they're going to get this WBBL away is by actually transferring all of the teams down to Tasmania, so that if any COVID situations happen, as we've seen happen in all of the sporting competitions around the country, they'll be able to travel to and from there with ease, because there's no restrictions up against people who are based in Tasmania at the moment.
And turning to men's cricket now, there's been a lot of to and fro about whether the Ashes will happen or not. Now it sounds like it's 95% confirmed.
Yeah, basically. So England have named their 17-man squad for that Ashes tour. Head coach Chris Silverwood has lent on some familiar faces for the trip. Silverwood and captain Joe Root, they've actually been unable to call upon a full-strength side due to the continued hiatus of star all-rounder Ben Stokes and injuries to Jofra Archer, Ollie Stone and Sam Curran. But yeah, like you said, Joe, this has really been up in the air with those discussions with Cricket Australia around the arrangements for the families and all the different kind of quarantine situations that could be rearing their head. Well, no player actually opted out of touring. So everyone who was fit to play is coming down, and we know that those veteran fast bowlers in James Anderson and Stuart Broad, they'll be back again. So I can't wait for the Ashes. Fingers crossed we get it away. And
Lewis Hamilton under a bit of pressure in Formula One.
Yeah, so seven-time world champ didn't quite get it done yesterday in the last Formula One race. His teammate Valtteri Bottas actually won the Turkish Grand Prix for Mercedes, but Max Verstappen for Red Bull finished second, but he also took back the World Championship lead. So he's now 6 points clear of Lewis Hamilton. And Hamilton started the race in 11th spot on the grid, but worked his way up to 5th. But yeah, he was pretty frustrated because there was a late pit stop that denied him a possible podium place. He was 2 points ahead of Verstappen going into the race. Now Verstappen is 6 points clear. Red Bull's Sergio Perez finished third at the race, and Bottas, who hadn't won a race for more than a year, took home a bonus point as well for the fastest lap. And Tyson Fury got up in this big heavyweight bout, and just as an example of the power of some of these hits, there was one in this vision that will show, I think Deontay got a hit on him, and the power, you can see it rippling down the side of his body. Some of this, like, it's so amazing, the footage that we have now with the standard of cameras, because these guys, like, it really captures it. And these guys, they just went toe to toe. Took 11 rounds for Tyson Fury to knock down Deontay Wilder for the third time, and in doing so, he retained his WBC heavyweight title. But yeah, have a look at him coming out. But yeah, some of these hits, Joe. I mean, you couldn't pay me enough money to get in one of those rings and fight against these men.
There's that point where it just ripples down his body.
Yeah, so that was Wilder getting Fury, and then you got Fury there. That's the last one that stopped the fight. Oof. But yeah, just some like, people are saying it's one of the best bouts and series of bouts in history, because that was the third one that they'd had, and 11 rounds it took to get that result. Amazing stuff.
And Tony, I was devastated on Monday when I realised you weren't working for the week, because you were robbing me of my moment in the sun. So I'd just like to get it on the record. Who predicted a Penrith victory? Who predicted a Cleary-Churchill winner? And who predicted a margin of 2 or so?
I'm not too proud to eat humble pie, Joe. It was you.
Sam, what was your prediction?
That doesn't matter. You were right.
Good stuff. Great to have you back, Tony.
Good to be back, mate. See ya.
Cheers. Stick with us on the ABC News channel. Going for a short break now. We'll be back soon. So we've had the COVID figures through for both New South Wales and Victoria already this morning, and very sadly more people have died. But at least in terms of case numbers, there's kind of promising news with the number for today. It's just one day, but coming down pretty significantly in Victoria from over the weekend down into the 1600s. And in New South Wales, still in the 400s, those COVID cases. We're expecting New South Wales Premier Dominic Perrottet to speak shortly.